The Sunset Valley truck stop was a quiet haven nestled off the bustling interstate, its worn linoleum floors and vinyl booths welcoming weary travelers. The hum of diesel engines, the clink of coffee cups, and the occasional burst of laughter from truckers filled the air on most nights. But this evening was different. The air felt charged, heavy with an unspoken tension that settled over the place like a brewing storm. Emma Kane sat at the corner booth, her back to the wall, a steaming cup of black coffee in her hands. She was a fixture at the truck stop, known by the staff and regulars for her calm demeanor and watchful eyes. As a retired Marine Force recon officer, Emma had spent her life in situations far more dangerous than any truck stop drama. Tonight, however, the familiar comfort of the diner was about to be shattered. The rumble of motorcycles broke through the chatter like a clap of thunder. Heads turned toward the large windows as 5 chrome-laden bikes pulled into the parking lot, their riders dismounting with deliberate swagger. The Storm Riders, a notorious biker gang, were infamous along this stretch of highway for their intimidation and penchant for chaos. Martha, the truck stop's owner, froze mid-pour as she refilled a customer's coffee. Her hands trembled slightly, spilling drops onto the counter. "Not them again," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Tom Baker, the grizzled cook who had worked at Sunset Valley for years, stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Just stay calm," he murmured. "They'll come in, make their scene, and leave. Let's not give them a reason to stick around." The door jingled as Jack Thunder Morrison entered, his imposing frame filling the entrance. His leather jacket bore the Storm Rider's insignia, a winged skull wreathed in flames. Behind him were his crew, Tank, Ghost, Razor, and Wolf, each as menacing as the next. They fanned out into the diner, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere from uneasy to outright fearful. Thunder's sharp eyes scanned the room before settling on Sarah, the young waitress who stood frozen behind the counter. "Evenin', sweetheart," he drawled, his voice low and mocking. "How about some service for me and my boys?" Sarah swallowed hard, her knuckles white as she gripped her notepad. Martha started to step forward, but Emma's quiet voice stopped her. "Stay back," Emma said, her tone calm yet firm. "I'll handle this." Emma rose from her booth, her movements deliberate. The room seemed to hold its breath as she walked toward Thunder, her boots echoing on the tile floor. She stopped a few feet from him, her posture relaxed but commanding. "The lady's not interested," Emma said evenly, her gaze meeting Thunder's without flinching. "Neither is anyone else here. I suggest you leave." Thunder's lips curled into a sneer. "And who's gonna make us, huh? You?" He stepped closer, his towering frame looming over Emma. "You've got a big mouth for someone so small." Emma didn't move, her expression unchanging. "Size isn't everything," she replied coolly. "Marine Force Recon taught me that." The mention of her military background caused a flicker of uncertainty in Thunder's eyes, but he quickly masked it with bravado. "Military, huh? Well, this ain't the battlefield, sweetheart." "No, it's not," Emma agreed, setting her coffee cup down on the counter. "On a battlefield, I wouldn't have given you this many chances to walk away." Thunder's crew exchanged uneasy glances. Tank, the largest of the group, cracked his knuckles. "Boss, let me handle her," he growled, stepping forward. Thunder raised a hand to stop him. "No," he said, his eyes never leaving Emma. "I want to hear what she's got to say." He leaned in closer, his breath hot and reeking of stale beer. "So what's it gonna be, Marine?" Emma finally moved. In one fluid motion, she sidestepped Thunder's grasp, grabbed his arm, and used his momentum to slam him face-first onto the counter. The room erupted in gasps as she twisted his arm behind his back, holding him firmly in place. "Last chance," Emma said quietly, her voice steady. "Leave. Now." Tank started forward, but stopped when Emma applied slight pressure to Thunder's arm, eliciting a pained grunt. The other bikers hesitated, their bravado faltering. The truckers, emboldened by Emma's actions, began to rise from their seats, ready to back her up if necessary. Thunder struggled briefly, but Emma's hold was unyielding. Realizing he was outmatched, he growled, "Fine. Let me up." Emma released him, stepping back but remaining ready. Thunder straightened, rubbing his arm and glaring at her with a mixture of humiliation and rage. "This isn't over," he spat. "Yes, it is," Emma replied firmly. "Unless you want me to demonstrate more of what Force Recon taught me." Thunder glared at her for a moment longer before gesturing to his crew. "Let's go," he barked. The storm riders filed out, their engines roaring to life as they peeled out of the parking lot. As the sound of motorcycles faded into the distance, the diner erupted in applause. Martha approached Emma, her hands shaking. "That was... I don't even have words." "Thank you." Emma picked up her coffee cup, her expression calm. "Sometimes the best fights are the ones you prevent," she said. But her eyes flicked to the door, her military instincts warning her that this wasn't the end. Thunder would be back, and next time, he wouldn't come alone. Tom moved behind the counter, his face grim. "What do we do now?" Emma looked around at the truckers and staff who had rallied behind her. "We prepare," she said simply. "Next time, they'll find out this isn't just a truck stop. It's a community. And we stand together." The Storm Riders' hideout sat on the edge of a forgotten industrial park, a desolate cluster of rusted gas pumps and graffiti-stained walls. The hum of nearby power lines was the only sound besides the distant rumble of trucks on the highway. Inside the garage, tension hung as heavy as the oil-stained air. Jack Thunder Morrison paced, his boots grinding into the cracked concrete floor. "We're a joke now," Thunder growled, slamming his fist onto the hood of an old Harley. The gang flinched at the outburst, but said nothing. Ghost, the quietest of the group, leaned against a wall, arms crossed and eyes thoughtful. "What are we doing, Jack?" Ghost finally asked, his voice steady but filled with unspoken challenge. Thunder whirled on him. "What are we doing? We're taking back our respect. That woman made fools of us. You're not backing out now, are you?" Ghost held Thunder's gaze, unflinching. "I'm asking what the plan is. Charging back in didn't work last time. What's different now?" The other bikers shifted uncomfortably. Tank, the enforcer, cracked his knuckles but stayed silent. Razor, the strategist, tapped his fingers on the edge of a tool chest, clearly considering Ghost's words. "She's not just some diner waitress," Ghost continued. "She's trained. Military. I'd bet my bike she's Marine Force Recon." The room fell silent. Even Thunder's anger momentarily waned as the weight of Ghost's words settled over them. "You sure?" Razor asked. Ghost nodded. "I'd know that stance anywhere. I've seen it before. Afghanistan, 2015. My convoy got ambushed outside Kandahar. Force Recon came in and pulled us out. If she's who I think she is, she's the real deal." Thunder scowled, but his mind raced. He remembered Emma's calm demeanor and the way she'd effortlessly subdued him in front of his men. It wasn't luck or bluffing, it was skill, honed in battle. "Doesn't matter," Thunder said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We're not walking away from this. Not after what she did." Ghost sighed, stepping forward. "We need to think this through, Jack. This isn't just about pride. She's not our enemy." "Not really." "Then who is?" Thunder snapped. Ghost paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Maybe it's us." Back at the Sunset Valley truck stop, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Emma Kane stood at the center of the diner, her calm voice cutting through the murmurs of the gathered crowd. Truckers, staff, and locals filled every seat, with others spilling into the parking lot. "This isn't just about one fight," Emma began, her tone firm but encouraging. "It's about showing bullies like the Storm Riders that fear doesn't work here. We stand together, and we stand strong." Martha, the diner's owner, nodded from behind the counter, her hands trembling as she poured coffee but her expression resolute. "They've been pushing people around for years. It's time someone pushed back." Big Rig Johnson, a veteran trucker with a booming voice, stood and raised his coffee mug. "We've got your back, Emma. No one's taking this place from us." Cheers erupted, but Emma raised a hand for silence. "This isn't about fighting. It's about standing our ground. Violence is their language, not ours. If they come back, we show them what unity looks like." The crowd murmured in agreement, and plans quickly took shape. Truckers volunteered to form a perimeter with their rigs, creating a wall of steel around the truck stop. Martha and the staff prepared supplies, while Tom, the mechanic, secured exits and ensured the lights were fully operational. Even Sarah, the young waitress who'd been terrified during the last encounter, stepped forward with newfound determination. "Teach me," Sarah said to Emma. "I don't want to feel helpless again." Emma smiled, recognizing the spark of courage in the girl's eyes. "First lesson, stay aware. The best way to avoid trouble is to see it coming." By nightfall, the truck stop resembled a fortress. The rumble of big rigs formed a steady soundtrack as drivers maneuvered their vehicles into strategic positions. Floodlights illuminated the parking lot, casting long shadows that danced on the asphalt. Inside the diner, the air buzzed with nervous energy. Emma stood by the window, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "They'll come," she said to Martha. "It's just a matter of when." True to her prediction, the distant growl of motorcycles soon broke the quiet. The storm riders approached, their headlights piercing the darkness like predatory eyes. Thunder led the formation, his face a mask of determination. Behind him, Ghost's expression was unreadable, but his hands gripped the handlebars tightly. As the bikers entered the lot, they were met with an unexpected sight. Rows of trucks lined the perimeter, their drivers standing in solidarity. Locals and staff gathered at the diner's entrance, their presence a silent but powerful statement. "We will not be intimidated." Thunder pulled his bike to a stop, his crew following suit. He dismounted slowly, his boots crunching against the gravel. For a moment, he simply stared at the scene before him, his jaw tightening. Emma stepped forward, her posture calm but commanding. "That's far enough," she called out. Thunder's lips curled into a sneer. "You think this changes anything? You think a few trucks and some scared locals can stop us?" "They're not scared," Emma replied evenly. "They're done being afraid. And so am I." Ghost stepped forward, his eyes locked on Emma. "You were in Kandahar," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Force recon." Emma nodded once, her gaze steady. "I remember you. You were transport division." The gang exchanged uneasy glances. This revelation shifted the dynamic, planting seeds of doubt in their resolve. Ghost turned to Thunder, his voice quieter but insistent. "She's not our enemy, Jack. She's a soldier. Like I was. Like I thought we all were." Thunder's fists clenched, his pride warring with the truth. He looked around, taking in the sight of the united community. For the first time, he hesitated. "You don't have to do this," Emma said, her voice softer now. "This doesn't have to end the way you think it does. Walk away. Find another path." The bikers murmured among themselves, their bravado cracking. Ghost's words carried weight, and Emma's presence only reinforced the doubt gnawing at them. "We're not walking away from this," Thunder said, though his voice lacked its usual force. "Not yet." "Then make your move," Emma challenged. "But know this, the people here won't let you win. And deep down, neither will you." The silence stretched, every second a battle of wills. Finally, Thunder let out a frustrated growl and turned to his crew. "Let's go." The storm riders hesitated, but one by one, they mounted their bikes and followed their leader. Ghost lingered for a moment, his gaze meeting Emma's. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod before revving his engine and riding off. As the sound of motorcycles faded into the night, the crowd erupted into cheers. Emma turned to face them, her expression a mix of relief and resolve. "This isn't over," she said, her voice carrying over the noise. "But tonight, we showed them who we are. And that matters." The truck stop's patrons knew the battle wasn't finished, but they also knew they'd taken the first step in reclaiming their safety and dignity. Together, under Emma's leadership, they had faced down fear and found their strength. And as the night stretched on, they prepared for what would come next, united and unbroken. The storm riders roared down the highway, their engines loud but their spirits muted. For the first time, their presence didn't leave behind a trail of fear. The confrontation at Sunset Valley Truck Stop had stripped away more than their pride, it had fractured their very identity. Thunder rode at the front, his jaw clenched, his mind replaying the humiliating encounter. Emma Kane's calm authority haunted him, her words resonating deeper than he cared to admit. At the rear of the formation, Ghost's thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't shake the memory of Emma in Afghanistan. She had been a beacon of courage amidst chaos, saving lives under fire without hesitation. Her words at the truck stop weren't just bravado, they were the same unwavering principles she'd lived by in the battlefield. He glanced at the other riders and saw what he feared, doubt creeping in. Back at the truck stop, the atmosphere was transformed. What had been a place of fear and intimidation was now a hub of activity and determination. Locals worked side by side with truckers, repairing minor damages from the encounter and discussing how to make the truck stop a safe haven. Emma, ever the strategist, knew that defense wasn't enough. The community needed something bigger, something to rally around. During a meeting over coffee, Emma presented her idea. "There's a veterans shelter on Oak Street," she began, her voice steady but passionate. "It's falling apart. The men and women there deserve better, and we can help." Tom Baker, the truck stop's owner, nodded thoughtfully. "You think fixing up a building is going to change anything?" "It's not just about the building," Emma replied. "It's about showing people what we can do when we stand together. Intimidation thrives on division. Let's show everyone what unity looks like." The room buzzed with approval. Martha, the diner's longtime waitress, chimed in, "I'll get the word out." Truckers, locals, anyone willing to lend a hand. Emma's plan took shape quickly. Supplies were donated, teams were organized, and the work began. The veterans' shelter, once a neglected building, became a symbol of hope. Its walls were stripped, repaired, and painted. Every nail driven in, every beam lifted, seemed to strengthen the bonds of the community. Word of the project spread like wildfire. Truckers passing through shared stories of the renovations, inspiring other towns to consider their own projects. Local news picked up the story, drawing volunteers from nearby communities. Each new face brought not only hands to help but stories of resilience, of battles fought and hardships endured. Thunder heard about the shelter project through a passing trucker at a gas station. The man spoke with admiration, describing how the shelter was transforming from a rundown building into a sanctuary for veterans. Thunder's curiosity was piqued, but he dismissed it as another attempt by Emma to undermine his authority. "They're playing right into her hands," he muttered, trying to convince himself. Yet, as Ghost's gaze lingered on him, Thunder's resolve faltered. "Maybe she's got a point," Ghost said cautiously. "She's not just talking about helping people. She's doing it." Thunder's glare silenced him, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, as the gang gathered around a bonfire at their hideout, Ghost's words gnawed at Thunder. He thought of Emma's conviction, of her ability to command respect without fear. What if there was something to her way of doing things? Several days later, Thunder's curiosity got the better of him. He announced to his crew that they were going to Oak Street. The others exchanged wary glances but followed without question. As they approached the shelter, they were met not with hostility but with the sight of people working together, laughing, and building something meaningful. Emma saw them before they entered the lot. She stepped forward, her posture relaxed but watchful. "Didn't think you'd come back this soon," she said, her tone neutral. Thunder dismounted, his crew hesitating behind him. He took in the scene, walls freshly painted, a ramp being installed for wheelchair access, children carrying water to volunteers. "Heard about what you're doing here," he said gruffly. "Wanted to see if it's real." Emma crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "It is." "Want to help?" The directness of her offer caught Thunder off guard. Help? Why would you want us here? Because everyone deserves a chance to be better, Emma said simply. Even you. The crew shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. Ghost, however, stepped forward. What's the plan? He asked, his voice steady but low. Emma handed him a clipboard. We're finishing the roof today. We could use the manpower. To everyone's surprise, Ghost took the clipboard and walked toward the ladder. The other bikers hesitated, but when Thunder gave a curt nod, they followed. What began as an uneasy truce turned into something more. As the hours passed, the storm riders found themselves swept up in the momentum. Their skills, honed in less constructive pursuits, proved invaluable on the worksite. As the day wore on, Thunder found himself working alongside Tom Baker. The older man, skeptical at first, softened as he saw Thunder's genuine effort. You've got a knack for this, Tom admitted. Ever think about putting those skills to better use? Thunder's jaw tightened. Maybe I have, he muttered, his voice barely audible. Nearby, Ghost struck up a conversation with a veteran volunteer. They shared stories of their time in the service, their struggles with reintegration, and the solace they found in building something meaningful. For Ghost, it was a reminder of who he used to be, before he fell into the storm rider's orbit. By the time the sun set, the crew was quiet, their usual bravado replaced with something unfamiliar, introspection. As they mounted their bikes to leave, Emma approached Thunder. You've got a choice, she said. You can keep riding down the same road, or you can start building something worth being proud of. Thunder didn't respond, but her words stayed with him long after they'd ridden away. The storm rider's visit sparked a new wave of interest in the shelter project. News spread that even the notorious gang had pitched in. Donations poured in, and more volunteers arrived, eager to be part of something transformative. The shelter was no longer just a building, it was a movement, a symbol of what a united community could achieve. For Thunder, the experience stirred a restlessness he couldn't ignore. The man who once thrived on power and fear now found himself questioning everything. Ghost's quiet reflections, Emma's unshakable resolve, and the warmth of the community, all of it gnawed at him. What if there was another way? Back at their hideout, the gang's usual revelry felt hollow. Thunder sat apart from the others, staring into the embers of the dying fire. What's on your mind, boss? Ghost asked, breaking the silence. Thunder didn't look up. Do you ever think about what we could have been if we'd made different choices? Ghost nodded, his voice steady. It's not too late, you know. Thunder's laugh was bitter. You think helping fix a roof changes anything? It's a start, Ghost said. Sometimes that's all it takes. The shelter's grand reopening was scheduled for the following week. Emma's leadership had turned a dilapidated building into a beacon of hope. Thunder watched from a distance as the community celebrated their achievement. For the first time in years, he felt something stir within him, a longing to be part of something good, something lasting. That night, he gathered his crew. We need to talk, he said, his voice firm but uncertain. The firelight flickered across their faces as they waited for him to continue. Maybe it's time we figured out what we really stand for. The road ahead was uncertain, but for Thunder and the Storm Riders, the first steps toward redemption had been taken. And at Sunset Valley Truck Stop, the community's work was far from over. They had learned that when people stood together, even the darkest chapters could be rewritten. Emma's leadership turned the shelter renovation into more than a construction project. It became a movement of unity and second chances. The once neglected building on Oak Street started to transform, not just in its physical structure, but as a symbol of resilience and collaboration. Locals and truckers worked side by side, their efforts fueled by the shared vision of creating something meaningful. People who once avoided each other now shared tools and swapped stories, finding common ground in their sweat and determination. The shelter's progress was visible day by day. Walls that had been crumbling were now reinforced. The roof, once riddled with holes, gleamed with new shingles. Bright paint replaced the peeling remnants of neglect. Every stroke of the brush and every nail driven became a testament to the community's resolve. Among the workers were Thunder and his crew. Their initial hesitation had slowly given way to cautious participation. Ghost had been the first to cross the bridge, his respect for Emma overriding his loyalty to the storm rider's past ways. His quiet presence and military background made him a natural intermediary between the bikers and the locals. "If she can see something in us worth saving," Ghost said to Thunder one day, "maybe we ought to figure out what that is." The first week was awkward for everyone. The bikers, unused to anything but intimidation, struggled to adjust. But as the days turned into weeks, they began to find their rhythm. Tank, whose brute strength was once a source of fear, became invaluable in moving heavy beams and materials. Razor's keen eye for detail helped ensure every cut of wood was precise. Even Wolf, known for his fiery temper, found surprising satisfaction in sanding down wooden frames until they were smooth. Emma worked closely with Ghost, guiding him as he rebuilt his confidence and leadership. She saw in him a man torn between the camaraderie he found in the Storm Riders and the principles he'd lived by during his military service. "Redemption's not a straight path," she told him one afternoon as they measured for new windows. "It's messy, and it takes time. But it's worth it." The transformation was slow but steady. The bikers' leather jackets, symbols of their former life, began to collect dust as they embraced the work. The hostility that had once marked their interactions with the community was replaced by tentative cooperation. And in their quiet moments, they found themselves reflecting on what had brought them to this point. One evening, as the crew gathered for a break, Ghost opened up about his past. Sitting on a makeshift bench, his voice carried the weight of years spent suppressing memories. "I wasn't always like this," he began, his eyes scanning the group. "Back in Afghanistan, my convoy got ambushed. We were outnumbered, pinned down. Most of us didn't think we'd make it." He looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. "But then she showed up," Ghost continued, his voice steadying. "Her unit came out of nowhere, cutting through the chaos. Emma didn't just fight, she led. She kept us alive." The group listened intently, the usual bravado replaced by quiet respect. "I came back from that tour thinking I'd rebuild my life," Ghost said, his tone softening. "But it's not that simple. You carry things with you. And somewhere along the way, I got lost." Thunder, leaning against a nearby post, shifted uncomfortably. Ghost's words struck a nerve, echoing the doubts he'd been suppressing. Emma placed a hand on Ghost's shoulder. "You found your way back," she said simply. "And that's what matters." While Ghost began to reconnect with his sense of purpose, Thunder's struggle deepened. Watching his crew work alongside the locals, he couldn't ignore the shift happening around him. The camaraderie he saw reminded him of what he'd lost long before forming the Storm Riders. One afternoon, he found himself talking with Tom Baker. The older man, once skeptical of Thunder's presence, had softened as he saw the bikers' genuine efforts. "You've got a talent for this," Tom said, gesturing to the new porch Thunder had just helped build. "Ever think about doing it full-time?" Thunder didn't answer immediately. He looked at his hands, calloused from years of riding but now covered in sawdust. "I'm not sure I'm cut out for this," he muttered. "You're cut out for more than you think," Tom replied. The exchange left Thunder unsettled. That night, back at their hideout, he sat apart from his crew, staring into the embers of the fire. "What are we even doing here?" he asked aloud. Tank looked up, surprised by the question. "Fixing a roof, building some walls." "I mean here," Thunder said, gesturing broadly. "With the riders. With all of this." The group fell silent. Ghost spoke up. "Maybe we're figuring out who we really are." The day of the shelter's grand reopening arrived with a sense of celebration. The community came together to admire the finished work, a building transformed from a place of despair into a beacon of hope. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a crowd, including local officials and veterans eager to see the result of the collective effort. Thunder and his crew stood to the side, watching as Emma gave a speech. "This shelter represents more than just a roof over someone's head," she said. It's proof that when people come together, they can build more than structures. They can rebuild lives. Her words resonated with Thunder. For the first time, he felt the weight of his choices and the possibility of something different. When Emma finished speaking, she approached Thunder. "Thank you for helping," she said sincerely. "We didn't do it for thanks," Thunder replied gruffly. "Then why did you do it?" Emma asked. Thunder didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at his crew, at Ghost, and at the shelter. Finally, he said, "Maybe we're tired of being the bad guys." The reopening was only the beginning. Word of the project's success spread, inspiring nearby towns to launch similar initiatives. For the first time, the Storm Riders found themselves invited to contribute, their skills recognized as valuable rather than feared. Thunder, once a man driven by pride and intimidation, began to embrace the respect he earned through genuine effort. The community's acceptance felt foreign but undeniably better than their fear. Ghost's role as a bridge between the Storm Riders and the community deepened. He organized a workshop to teach basic carpentry to local youth, sharing not just his skills but his story of redemption. "Everyone gets lost sometimes," he told the group. "What matters is finding your way back." For Emma, the project's success reaffirmed her belief in the power of second chances. She saw the potential in the Storm Riders, but she also knew their journey was far from over. As she watched Thunder helping a veteran with a wheelchair ramp, she approached him. "You've got what it takes to lead," she said. Thunder met her gaze, his expression conflicted. "Lead what?" "Something worth believing in," Emma replied. The possibility hung in the air like a challenge. And for the first time, Thunder didn't dismiss it outright. The shelter stood as a testament to what could be achieved when people united for a common cause. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of a transformation, not just for the building, but for everyone who had a hand in its revival. The sound of hammers and saws echoed across the site as the shelter neared completion. For weeks, the work had been steady, fueled by the combined efforts of the community and the reformed Storm Riders. Among the workers was Thunder, who had begun to shed his hardened exterior, though he still carried the weight of his past like a well-worn jacket. His crew noticed the change in him, especially Ghost, who had become a quiet but unwavering advocate for the group's transformation. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the freshly painted walls, a familiar car pulled into the lot. Thunder froze as the door opened and Kelly stepped out, her movements cautious but resolute. Behind her, a lanky teenager emerged, his eyes a mix of curiosity and trepidation. It was Tommy. Thunder's heart twisted at the sight of his son, taller than he remembered, carrying himself with a maturity that struck him as both proud and bittersweet. Kelly's voice broke the silence. "Thought we'd come see what you've been working on." Thunder wiped his hands on his jeans, suddenly self-conscious. "Didn't expect you to come." "Tommy wanted to see for himself," Kelly replied, her tone even but edged with vulnerability. She glanced at the shelter. "It's impressive." Tommy stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Thunder. "You did all this, Dad?" Thunder hesitated, then nodded. "Not just me. It's a team effort." Tommy's expression softened with admiration. "It's amazing. You always told me a good foundation is the key to building something that lasts." The word struck Thunder deeply. He cleared his throat, feeling the eyes of his crew and the community on him. "Yeah, well, it's true. Foundation's everything." The reunion didn't happen all at once, but the moments that followed planted the seeds for healing. Kelly stayed to watch as Tommy eagerly joined in, learning from Thunder and the other bikers. The boys' questions and enthusiasm broke through the layers of resentment and regret that had built up between them. As Tommy helped carry supplies and hammered nails, he watched his father's interactions with the others. There was no shouting or posturing, only collaboration and respect. Thunder's role as a leader was unmistakable, and for the first time, Tommy saw his father as someone to look up to again. Kelly observed from a distance, her arms crossed but her stance relaxed. Emma approached her with 2 cups of coffee. "Mind some company?" Kelly smiled faintly. Not at all. They sat on a bench overlooking the worksite. He's changed, Emma said softly. Or maybe he's just finding his way back to who he's always been. Kelly's eyes followed Thunder as he guided Tommy through a task. I've seen glimpses of this version of him before. It's why I married him. But life has a way of breaking people down. Emma nodded. And sometimes, rebuilding is the only way forward. The presence of Tommy on the worksite brought a new energy to the crew. It wasn't long before other teens from the community began showing up, curious about the work and eager to learn. Emma saw an opportunity and approached Thunder with an idea. These kids need guidance, she said, gesturing toward a group watching from the edge of the lot. You and your crew have the skills to teach them. Show them there's a better path. Thunder frowned. You think they'll listen to us? We're not exactly role models. Emma's gaze was steady. That's exactly why they'll listen. You've been where they are, made the same mistakes. If anyone can reach them, it's you. The idea took root. Ghost, who had already begun to mentor younger volunteers, took the lead in organizing lessons. He showed the teens how to use tools, shared stories of his military service, and spoke openly about his struggles with reintegration. It's not about where you start, he told them one afternoon. It's about where you're willing to go. Tank, once the gang's enforcer, discovered a knack for teaching electrical work. His gruff demeanor softened as he patiently guided a boy through wiring a socket. Razor, with his sharp mind for strategy, became a natural at explaining structural planning and problem-solving. The bikers' transformation was undeniable. Their old leather jackets began to gather dust, replaced by work shirts and tool belts. The community, initially wary, began to see them as allies rather than adversaries. Each completed task brought a sense of accomplishment and a growing connection between the former outlaws and their new neighbors. Despite the progress, Thunder still wrestled with his identity. Late one evening, as the crew packed up for the day, he found himself alone on the worksite. The moonlight illuminated the shelter's walls, now sturdy and vibrant. Emma appeared beside him, her steps quiet but purposeful. It's coming together, she said. Thunder nodded, his gaze distant. Feels like something I never thought I'd be part of. Emma studied him for a moment. You've got a gift, Jack. Leadership, vision, the ability to inspire people. But it's not enough to lead. You have to decide where you're taking them. Her words hit home. Thunder's crew was looking to him for direction, not just for the project, but for their future. He realized he couldn't lead them back to the old ways. They deserved better, and so did he. The day of the shelter's grand reopening arrived with fanfare. The community gathered to celebrate their collective achievement, and the atmosphere was electric with pride and hope. Thunder stood at the edge of the crowd, his son by his side and Kelly nearby. He felt an unfamiliar sense of belonging. When Emma called him forward to speak, he hesitated. Public speaking had never been his strength, but the crowd's encouragement gave him the push he needed. I'm not good with words, he began, his voice rough but steady. But I'll say this shelter isn't just a building. It's a second chance, for everyone who walks through its doors, and for people like me who thought we'd run out of chances. The applause was thunderous. For Thunder, it was more than approval, it was redemption. The reopening marked a turning point, but it was just the beginning. Thunder and his crew, now integrated into the community, began taking on new projects. They repaired playgrounds, rebuilt a damaged community center, and even started mentoring youth groups in nearby towns. Kelly and Tommy became regular fixtures in Thunder's life. Their presence grounded him, reminding him of what he was working toward. Tommy, inspired by his father's journey, expressed interest in architecture. Thunder took every opportunity to teach him, sharing not just technical skills but life lessons about resilience and responsibility. Emma remained a steadfast guide, ensuring the momentum didn't falter. Her leadership extended beyond the worksite, fostering collaborations between towns and encouraging others to follow the examples set at the shelter. One evening, as the crew gathered at the truck stop for a well-earned meal, Ghost raised a toast. To building more than just walls, he said. To building futures. The sentiment was met with cheers, but Thunder's gaze lingered on the faces around him. For the first time in years, he felt at peace, not because he'd escaped his past, but because he was actively shaping his future. The storm riders were gone, replaced by something far more enduring, a team of builders, mentors, and friends united by purpose. The shelter's success sparked a wave of change that extended far beyond Sunset Valley. Other towns reached out, eager to replicate the model of community-driven transformation. Thunder and his crew found themselves in high demand, not as bikers but as builders. For Thunder, the work was more than a job. It was a daily act of redemption, a way to prove to himself and others that change was possible. Each nail driven and each wall raised was a step away from his past and toward the man he wanted to be, the man his son could proudly call Dad. As the crew packed up their tools one evening, Emma approached Thunder with a rare smile. "You've come a long way, Jack." "We all have." Thunder looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "It's not just about how far we've come. It's about where we're going." And as the sun set over the shelter, now bustling with life and hope, it was clear that where they were going was somewhere better, together. The veterans' shelter stood as a beacon of hope against the horizon, its walls freshly painted, its roof newly shingled. For the community of Sunset Valley, the shelter symbolized more than just a place of refuge, it was proof of what could be accomplished when people united. For the storm riders, now deeply entrenched in the effort, it marked the start of something transformative. Emma Kane surveyed the site, her heart swelling with pride. Volunteers bustled around her, but her attention lingered on the bikers. Thunder worked alongside a retired carpenter, his hands steady as he sanded a wooden railing. Nearby, Ghost demonstrated to a group of teenagers how to measure and cut boards accurately. The storm riders were no longer just bikers, they were builders. As the project neared completion, Emma gathered the bikers and key community members around a makeshift meeting table in the shelter's courtyard. "We're almost done here," she began. "But this can't just be an ending. It needs to be a beginning. For the shelter, for the community, and for all of you." Thunder leaned back, arms crossed. "We've done good work here, but what are you getting at?" Emma's gaze met his. "It's time to redefine who you are. You've proven that you can build instead of tear down. Let's make it official. A new name, a new mission. The Phoenix Builders." The bikers exchanged glances. Some nodded, others looked skeptical. "A phoenix?" Tank asked, scratching his chin. "Like the bird that burns up and comes back to life?" Emma smiled. "Exactly. It's a symbol of rebirth, of rising from the ashes to become something greater. That's what you've done here, and it's what you can keep doing." Ghost spoke up, his quiet voice carrying weight. "I like it. We've all been through the fire, and we're still standing. Maybe it's time to embrace that." Thunder's brow furrowed. "And what happens to who we were? Just throw it all away?" Emma's voice softened. "You don't throw it away, Thunder. You carry it with you, but you don't let it define you. You've got the chance to rewrite your story. Don't waste it." The decision wasn't made overnight, but over the next week, the bikers embraced the idea. Thunder's initial resistance gave way to cautious acceptance as he saw the excitement in his crew and the growing respect from the community. The turning point came when his son, Tommy, presented him with a design for a new jacket emblem, a phoenix rising from a base of tools, a hammer, a wrench, and a saw. "You drew this?" Thunder asked, studying the sketch. Tommy nodded eagerly. "Yeah, Mom helped me clean it up a little, but the idea's mine. What do you think?" Thunder's voice caught in his throat. He looked at Kelly, who smiled encouragingly. "It's perfect," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The storm riders officially became the Phoenix Builders. Their old leather jackets, symbols of intimidation and rebellion, were retired. In their place, new jackets were distributed, each bearing the Phoenix emblem. The transformation was complete, and their first project as the Phoenix Builders was already lined up, repairing the Sunset Valley Senior Center. The Senior Center project became a cornerstone of the Phoenix Builders' new identity. It wasn't just about repairs, it was about community. They installed wheelchair ramps, fixed leaking roofs, and repainted faded walls. The bikers worked shoulder to shoulder with local volunteers, including some of the seniors who would benefit from the renovations. Ghost, who had always preferred to stay in the background, found himself mentoring at-risk youth who had been brought in to help. "I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong anywhere," he told one boy. "But you do. You just have to start building something, even if it's just one piece at a time." Tank, once known for his quick temper, discovered a talent for teaching as he guided teens through electrical work. Razor, the group's strategic thinker, became instrumental in planning each project, ensuring that resources and labor were used efficiently. Even Wolf, who had been the most reluctant to change, found purpose in heavy lifting and demolition, which he jokingly called controlled chaos. Thunder, meanwhile, wrestled with his new role. Leading the Phoenix Builders was a far cry from leading the Storm Riders. It wasn't about dominance or fear, it was about respect and responsibility. He leaned heavily on Emma's guidance, often seeking her advice late at night when doubts crept in. "What if I'm not cut out for this?" he asked her one evening as they stood outside the senior center. Emma's gaze was steady. "Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, making the hard decisions, and owning your mistakes. You're doing that, Thunder. That's what matters." The Phoenix Builders' transformation didn't go unnoticed. Local media began covering their projects, highlighting the group's remarkable journey from feared bikers to community leaders. The stories inspired other towns to reach out, asking how they could replicate the model. One such request came from a neighboring town struggling with its own challenges. A church needed repairs, and a youth center was on the verge of closing due to neglect. Thunder and Emma traveled there to meet with local leaders, sharing their experiences and offering guidance. "It starts with believing people can change," Emma told the group. "But you have to give them the tools and the opportunity to prove it." The visit marked the beginning of a regional movement. The Phoenix Builders became a symbol of hope, proving that even the most unlikely people could create positive change. Back in Sunset Valley, the Phoenix Builders expanded their efforts to include mentorship programs. They partnered with local schools and youth organizations, offering workshops on everything from basic carpentry to life skills. One afternoon, Thunder found himself teaching a group of teenagers how to frame a door. Tommy stood beside him, eager to help. "Why are you doing this?" one of the boys asked, curiosity and skepticism in his voice. Thunder paused, his hands resting on the frame. "Because someone once gave me a second chance. Now it's my turn to do the same." The boy nodded, his expression softening. For the first time, he picked up a hammer and started working alongside Thunder. As the Phoenix Builders flourished, Thunder's past continued to shadow him. He received an unexpected visit from a former Storm Rider who had parted ways with the gang years earlier. The man, lean and scarred, looked at Thunder with a mix of nostalgia and regret. "Heard about what you've been doing," he said. "Didn't think you had it in you." Thunder's jaw tightened. "People change." The man laughed bitterly. "Not everyone." Thunder's eyes hardened. "No, not everyone. But the ones who want to. They can." The man's gaze lingered on the Phoenix emblem on Thunder's jacket. After a moment, he nodded. "Maybe you're right." Months passed, and the Phoenix Builders' reputation continued to grow. The senior center was completed, and the group had moved on to their next project, converting an abandoned factory into affordable housing. The work was grueling, but the rewards were immeasurable. On the day of the factory's ribbon-cutting ceremony, Thunder stood before the gathered crowd, his family by his side. His voice was steady as he spoke. "We've all made mistakes. We've all been lost. But today, we stand here as proof that it's never too late to rebuild. Not just buildings, but lives. The applause was deafening, but what mattered most to Thunder was the pride he saw in Tommy's eyes and the warmth of Kelly's hand in his. As the crowd dispersed, Emma approached him. "You've come a long way, Thunder." He smiled, the weight of his old life finally lifting. "We all have." "Thanks to you." Emma shook her head. "Thanks to you. The phoenix didn't rise because of me. It rose because you chose to rebuild." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the factory and the gathered community. For the Phoenix builders, it wasn't just the end of another project, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with purpose, hope, and the promise of brighter days ahead. The midday sun blazed down on the construction site of the new community garden, a project spearheaded by the Phoenix builders. The once neglected plot of land was now bustling with activity. Children ran around carrying small shovels, volunteers planted flowers, and the air was filled with the sound of laughter and purpose. Thunder Morrison stood at the center, his weathered hands gripping a blueprint. His new leather jacket, emblazoned with the emblem of a rising phoenix, caught the sunlight, a symbol of the transformation that had brought him here. The camaraderie was interrupted by the distant rumble of motorcycle engines. Thunder's ears perked up, and he exchanged a wary glance with Ghost, who was helping a group of teens assemble wooden planter boxes. The rumble grew louder until a line of motorcycles emerged, their riders clad in leather jackets bearing the emblem of a snarling wolf. The Wolf Pack, a notorious gang with a reputation for violence and chaos, had arrived. The construction came to a halt as everyone turned to watch the intruders. The tension was palpable. Emma Kane, who had been coordinating supplies near the tool shed, stepped forward, her sharp gaze scanning the bikers as they dismounted. "Looks like we've got company," Ghost muttered, moving to stand beside Thunder. The leader of the Wolf Pack, a burly man named Grizz, swaggered forward with a sneer. His gang fanned out behind him, their postures radiating aggression. Well, Grizz drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "If it isn't the Phoenix builders. Or should I say, the Phoenix babies? What's next?" Knitting circles. A ripple of uneasy laughter came from his crew. Thunder stepped forward, his face calm but resolute. "What do you want, Grizz?" Grizz's sneer widened. "Just came to see if the rumors were true. The big bad storm riders, playing house with the locals. Thought I'd remind you what real bikers are supposed to do." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "We're not builders, Morrison. We're destroyers." Thunder didn't flinch. "That's where you're wrong," he said evenly. "There's no strength in tearing things down. The real strength is in building something that lasts." The crowd of volunteers watched anxiously. Martha, the diner's matriarch, clutched a tray of lemonade pitchers, her knuckles white. Even the children had gone silent, sensing the gravity of the situation. Emma stepped up beside Thunder, her military-trained composure like a shield. "If you're here to cause trouble, you'll find you're outnumbered," she said coolly, her eyes darting to the group of truckers and volunteers who had started to form a protective semicircle. Grizz barked a laugh. "You think these civilians scare us?" He gestured to his gang. "We've taken down bigger fish than this motley crew." Thunder raised a hand, signaling for the crowd to stay back. "No one needs to fight today," he said, his voice carrying authority. "But if you think we're just going to roll over, you've got another thing coming." Grizz's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "And what's your big plan, Morrison? Bore us to death with your talk of rainbows and happy endings?" Thunder took a step closer, closing the gap between them. "I'm offering you a choice," he said firmly. "Join us. Help us build something real. Or keep riding down the road you're on and see where it takes you." The offer hung in the air like a challenge, drawing a murmur from the Phoenix builders and their supporters. Even some of the Wolf Pack riders exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado cracking under the weight of Thunder's words. Grizz's jaw tightened. "You think you can just wave your little Phoenix flag and we'll all fall in line?" he snarled. "This isn't some fairy tale, Morrison. People like us don't change." "People like us?" Thunder's voice rose, his frustration evident. You mean people who've lost everything? People who've made mistakes? I know what that's like, Grizz. But I also know it doesn't have to be the end. Grizz's eyes narrowed, his hands curling into fists. For a moment, it seemed like the tension would explode into violence. But before he could speak, Ghost stepped forward. He's telling the truth, Ghost said, his voice calm but commanding. I've been where you are. Angry, lost, thinking there's no way out. But there is. You just have to be willing to take it. Grizz looked at Ghost, his sneer faltering. And what makes you think we'd want to be part of your little charity project? Emma's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Because deep down, you know this life isn't sustainable. You know there's more out there than fear and destruction. And maybe you're tired of running. The silence that followed was deafening. Grizz's gang shifted uncomfortably, their confidence visibly shaken. One of the younger riders, a wiry man with nervous eyes, spoke up. What exactly are you offering? Thunder turned to face him. A chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. To use your skills to build instead of destroy. To make a real difference. Grizz whirled on the younger rider. Don't tell me you're buying into this nonsense. The younger man hesitated, then squared his shoulders. Maybe I am. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder all the time, Grizz. What's the point of it all? The murmurs among the wolf pack grew louder, their leader's grip on them visibly slipping. Grizz's face contorted with rage, but he seemed to realize he was losing control. With a frustrated growl, he turned back to Thunder. You think you've won? He spat. This isn't over. Thunder held his ground. It doesn't have to be, he said. The offer's still on the table. Grizz mounted his bike, signaling for his gang to follow. Most obeyed, but a handful lingered, their uncertainty etched on their faces. As the wolf pack roared away, Thunder turned to face the crowd. The tension began to ease, replaced by a ripple of applause and cheers. Emma stepped beside him, her expression a mix of pride and caution. You handled that well, she said. But you know this isn't the end. Thunder nodded. I know. But it's a start. Ghost clapped him on the shoulder. That was brave, boss. Not the old kind of brave, but the kind that matters. The Phoenix builders resumed their work, the encounter galvanizing them rather than shaking their resolve. Even the children seemed emboldened, running back to their tasks with renewed energy. The community had stood together and prevailed without violence, proving the strength of their values. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thunder sat with Emma on the steps of the community garden. The day's events weighed heavily on him, but there was also a sense of accomplishment. Do you think they'll come back? He asked. Emma shrugged. Probably. But if they do, we'll be ready. And maybe next time, more of them will listen. Thunder sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't think I'd ever see the day when words felt stronger than fists. Emma smiled faintly. That's because real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how much you can inspire. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, the Phoenix builders gathered around a bonfire, their laughter and camaraderie filling the air. They were no longer just a group of bikers trying to prove themselves. They were leaders, mentors, and builders of a brighter future. And in that moment, they knew that no challenge, not even one from their past, could derail their newfound purpose. 1 year had passed since the storm-ridden night when the Phoenix builders shed their old identities and embraced a path of renewal. The transformation was nothing short of remarkable. What began as a desperate attempt to turn their lives around had blossomed into a thriving organization, with over 50 members working tirelessly on community projects throughout the county. The Sunset Valley truck stop had become more than a diner or a rest area. It was now home to the Phoenix Builders Training Center. The building, a collaborative effort between the Phoenix builders and the local community, stood as a testament to what could be achieved through determination and unity. Its polished floors and bright classrooms welcomed veterans, former gang members, and at-risk youth seeking to learn construction skills, find purpose, and rebuild their lives. The training center buzzed with activity. The sound of hammers and drills blended with the hum of conversation as experienced builders mentored newcomers. Outside, young apprentices worked side by side with seasoned Phoenix builders, painting murals on the center's walls. The Phoenix emblem, a symbol of rebirth and growth, adorned the entrance, its fiery wings stretched wide in a silent promise of hope. Thunder stood near the entrance of the training center, watching his teenage son, Tommy, teach a group of apprentices how to frame a door. Tommy's voice carried an air of confidence that made Thunder's chest swell with pride. For years, Thunder had feared he'd lost the connection with his family. Now, it was stronger than ever. Kelly approached, carrying a tray of sandwiches for the workers. She smiled as she watched Tommy explain the importance of precision in carpentry. "He's got your eye for detail," she said, handing Thunder a sandwich. "And your stubbornness." Thunder chuckled, taking a bite. "Stubbornness isn't always a bad thing. It got us here, didn't it?" Kelly's smile softened. "It did. But it's not just stubbornness. It's your heart, Jack. You've shown everyone, including Tommy, that change is possible." Thunder's gaze fell on Tommy, who was now laughing with the apprentices. "He's the one inspiring me," Thunder admitted. "I just hope I'm setting the right example now." Kelly placed a hand on his arm. "You are. And you always will." Emma stood on the training center's second-floor balcony, overlooking the bustling courtyard below. The energy and camaraderie reminded her of her days in the military. But this was different. This was about rebuilding lives, not just surviving battles. Tom Baker joined her, leaning against the railing. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" he said, nodding toward the activity below. Emma smiled. "It's more than I ever imagined. When we started this, I just wanted to stop the chaos. Now, look at them. They're not just surviving, they're thriving." Tom handed her a cup of coffee. "You did this, Emma. You saw something in them that no one else did." Emma shook her head. "They did this. I just gave them a chance to see it in themselves." News of the Phoenix builders' transformation had spread beyond Sunset Valley. Local media outlets covered their projects, praising their ability to turn lives around. Stories of gang members mentoring teens and veterans teaching skills to others inspired communities near and far. Donations poured in, enabling the Phoenix builders to expand their operations. One such expansion involved renovating a senior center in a neighboring town. Thunder and Ghost led the project, working closely with local volunteers. For Ghost, the project felt personal. He often spoke to the apprentices about his time in the military, drawing parallels between the discipline of construction and the camaraderie of service. "It's about building trust," he told a group of wide-eyed apprentices. "With yourself, your team, and the people you're helping. That trust is the foundation for everything we do." The apprentices nodded, inspired by his words. Ghost's quiet leadership had become a cornerstone of the Phoenix builders' success, proving that even the most unlikely individuals could become role models. The Phoenix Builders Mentorship Program became one of their most celebrated initiatives. At-risk youth who once teetered on the edge of falling into gangs now found themselves surrounded by positive influences. Tank, once known for his fiery temper, became a patient and encouraging mentor. One day, a young boy named Marco approached Tank, holding a broken tool. I think I messed it up," Marco stammered, his eyes wide with worry. Tank crouched down, taking the tool and examining it. "You didn't mess it up," he said. "You just didn't know how to use it yet. Let's fix it together." Marco's face lit up as Tank showed him how to repair the tool. The moment was small, but it symbolized the Phoenix builders' philosophy: mistakes were opportunities to learn, not reasons to give up. The impact of the Phoenix builders rippled across the region. Communities began reaching out, asking how they could replicate the model. Emma and Thunder traveled to neighboring towns, sharing their story and offering guidance. At one town hall meeting, a skeptical attendee asked, "How can we trust people who used to cause so much trouble?" Thunder's response was firm but heartfelt. "Trust doesn't come easy, and we don't expect it to. But we've worked for it every single day. And if we can change, so can anyone else. All it takes is a chance, and people willing to give it." The room erupted in applause, and the meeting ended with several community members volunteering to start their own programs. As the training center grew, so did its influence. Tommy's architectural designs led to the addition of dormitories for veterans in transition. These spaces offered not just shelter but a sense of stability and belonging. Kelly coordinated family support services, ensuring that every individual's needs were met. The Phoenix builders hosted monthly open houses, inviting the public to see their work firsthand. At one such event, a young woman approached Emma, her voice trembling. I just wanted to say thank you. My brother, he was lost. But he found his place here." Emma squeezed the woman's hand. "It's not just about him finding his place. It's about all of us finding ours together." As the sun set on another day at the training center, the courtyard filled with laughter and camaraderie. Apprentices swapped stories, mentors offered advice, and the smell of barbecue wafted through the air. The Phoenix builders were more than a team, they were a family. Thunder stood with Tommy, admiring the latest addition to the training center, a mural depicting a phoenix rising from flames. "You know," Tommy said, "I think we're doing more than building things here. We're building people." Thunder ruffled his son's hair. "You're not wrong, kid. And I couldn't be prouder of you." Nearby, Kelly watched the scene, her heart full. She turned to Emma, who had joined her with a cup of coffee. "Did you ever think it would get this far?" Kelly asked. Emma's gaze swept over the bustling courtyard. "I hoped it would. But seeing it now, it's better than I ever imagined." The Phoenix Builders' story became a symbol of the power of second chances. Communities across the country took notice, and the organization's influence continued to grow. What began as a desperate bid for redemption had evolved into a movement, proving that even the most broken among us could rise from the ashes. As night fell, the Sunset Valley truck stop glowed with light and activity. The sound of motorcycles no longer signaled fear but hope. The Phoenix builders had transformed from destroyers into architects of change, showing the world that no one was beyond redemption. Emma stood at her usual spot by the window, watching the scene with quiet pride. Thunder joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "For everything you've done," he said, handing her a cup. She took it with a smile. "We all did this, Thunder. Together." As the stars emerged in the night sky, the Phoenix builders gathered for a final meeting of the day. Their voices carried the promise of new beginnings, of bridges built instead of walls. And somewhere out on the highways, more lost souls rode toward the light, drawn to the place where second chances were built, one nail, one brick, and one heart at a time.